Could Todd Monken end up bringing Odell Beckham Jr. to the Baltimore Ravens? We talk about how the connection with Monken and Beckham could make Odell Beckham a Raven. We get into the Ravens coaching changes they made over the course of Wednesday, talk about wide receivers, mock drafts, and so much more coming up next year on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host here with you, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, and we are here with you, of course, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here with us, tuning in, making us your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all podcasting platforms, including over in video form on YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. And we are back here. It is a Thursday episode, and we had a very interesting Wednesday for the Ravens yesterday as they made a sweeping amount of coaching changes, some shuffling, and we heard from Todd Monken during his introductory press conference on Tuesday that the coaching staff, at least the offensive coaching staff, was still a work in progress, and I think we saw that on Wednesday when Baltimore made those changes. We'll talk about those changes in the second segment in terms of quarterback, wide receiver coaches, and also strength and conditioning, a key part in that too. But in the first segment, I have to talk about it. I have to talk about Odell Beckham Jr. because of the comments that Todd Monken made during his press conference. I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot on Twitter. There's been a ton of conversation points about Odell Beckham Jr. in Baltimore, the potential of those two parties getting together and making it work after so many rumors last offseason and how so many people wanted him during the course of the entire 2022 regular season. We can talk about now because Todd Monken made those comments. We'll talk about if Monken could actually bring Odell Beckham Jr. to Baltimore, what it would mean for the Ravens, getting into how much it would cost in the actual risk versus reward, and just kind of not rehashing the old conversation, but adding a new twist onto the conversation of, hey, is this the offseason where the stars align and it actually makes sense and it works? So we'll talk about that in the first segment. Then in our final segment, we will answer more wide receiver questions about if star wide receivers will now want to come to Baltimore because of Todd Monken. We'll also get into some more mock drafts of the Ravens here for their 2023 draft. So again, so much to dive into as always here on Locked On Ravens. And we have another tan day for me where I look tan on the video. I'm a pale person, so it works out for me. If you want to see me in all my tan glory, you can come over to YouTube. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel in video form. We are a 5-day-a-week Ravens podcast. So Ravens news, analysis, updates. We are here for you Monday through Friday. And also it's the same show in audio form. Shout out to all the audio listeners, obviously alongside our video watchers too. Be sure to follow along anywhere you get your podcasts in audio form, whether you're on your way to work, on your way home from work, whatever you're doing, listening in audio form, if you're multitasking or just sitting and listening along. Thank you so much for tuning in here today with us. Let's talk about Odell Beckham Jr. now. And if, again, this is the offseason maybe where everything could work out for them. Now, just a brief history of everything with Odell. Obviously, one of the top, many argued he could be the top receiver in the league during his prime with the Giants, was just an incredible talent in New York, was a first-round draft pick out of LSU. He's 30 years old now, but just put up numbers with the Giants. 5-year Giant career, put up over 5,000 yards, had 44 touchdowns, goes to Cleveland, where, Cleveland has won the offseason for like 5 straight years, and I think this was almost like the beginning of that, where they get Odell, they get Jarvis Landry. The Cleveland tenure doesn't work out very well. And then he moves on from Cleveland in the middle of the 2021 season, signs with the Rams, is actually pretty productive for them, but tears his ACL, helping them win a Super Bowl. So 2022, there was a lot of conversation about where will he sign? Will he be ready to play at any point during the 2022 season? Will he be able to help a team during the playoffs potentially? And it didn't work out for him. Now, the reason we're talking about it here today is because Todd Monken, who's the Ravens' new offensive coordinator, had some things to say about Odell Beckham. He was asked about it by Vinny Cerrato during his introductory press conference. So shout out to Vinny for the question here. And Vinny asked Todd Monken about Odell and said, what are your impressions of Odell? And I'll read the full quote out here. First of all, Todd Monken said he didn't even know if he could talk about it, didn't know the rules because obviously tampering stuff. And Odell's a free agent. So he goes, oh, okay, then I can speak on it. And, he said he can't speak on a guy that's under contract, but says, quote, okay, I really like Odell. Odell is super athletic, twitchy. He really likes football. I really did like him. It didn't work out the year I was there, obviously with him in Cleveland, but ultimately he's like every skill player. He's no different. I don't know why everybody gets pissed off. Like he wants the ball. Well, really, I don't know where I've been where a great player didn't want the ball. I don't know where a basketball player didn't want shots or a baseball player didn't want to get at bats. That's what they want. They want opportunities to showcase their ability. I think it's awesome. I think he's tremendously skilled, and I like his personality. He likes to compete. He has a tough deal, though, because he's, in my opinion, he may think differently, is tough being a face. Does that make sense? Like NBA players deal with it all the time, but there are very few NFL players outside of the quarterback that they really know their face, that they're a market, and he's that way. And I think that makes it hard at times. When you're under the microscope like he is, it's really hard, but I like Odell a lot. I like his skill set, liked his work ethic. He fought through an injury. Tremendous, end quote there. So again, the whole press conference was Todd Monken being very insightful, very long answers, which me personally, I appreciated. I think it helped me kind of get to know who he is, what he wants in this partnership with him and the Ravens, and who he is as a person too. I think that's super important. But this answer sparked a lot in terms of, oh, well, wait, Odell's a free agent and looking for a team, and there were rumors connecting him in Baltimore in 2022. Well, is this the offseason where it could happen? And I don't think it's as far-fetched as some people might think, because for the Ravens, they've never been a team, in their history that has invested a ton at one time, money-wise, in wide receivers. There have been times here and there, if you really want to argue it, but it's not like other teams, I'll say that, where look, you traded a couple of mid-round draft picks for Anquan Bolden. You signed Steve Smith Sr. to a 3-year deal. Obviously, Derek Mason coming in all those years back, right? That feels like forever ago now. But then you have the Michael Crabtrees of the world and the Jeremy Maclins and the Des Bryants and the Mike Wallaces. And to be fair, Mike Wallace, he might be one of my favorite free agent signings for the Ravens, even though I know he was only like, okay, he wasn't really that great that offseason. When they brought in Eric Weddle and Mike Wallace, I was like, this is the perfect offseason for me. I liked both those guys. And obviously Eric Weddle worked out great for him. Mike Wallace, again, was just like kind of okay. But Odell is not going to, he's not going to be a guy that breaks the bank for you this offseason. His knee injury, it was an ACL. It happened in February. It was always kind of unlikely that he was going to make it back. And if he did, he would have probably been very limited, just trying to get caught up to speed in a December or a January type deal. And I was never really completely on board with bringing Odell in last offseason. Like, I think once the season got started, I was more on board with it. But for me, my whole thing, and this was when more options were on the table for him. So again, once the season got started, I was like, well, look, there's literally nothing out there. And if Odell can help you at even 70% capacity, the Ravens just have nobody, and Odell's talented to bring him in. But regardless, what I'm trying to say is during that offseason, there were other options who were healthy at the time who could have helped them, and the Ravens just passed up on all of them. For Odell, there were always questions about whether he was going to be able to come back from his knee injury less than a year after it happened. And we heard rumors that he was going to go to Dallas and go to the Giants and the Bills and the Chiefs and all these different teams. But apparently it felt like Dallas and Buffalo were the two that had the most traction. The Giants also, I know there was the reunion aspect there, but I think that it was Dallas that found stuff in his medicals that they didn't really like and said that he's not going to play this year or whatnot. And it never worked out for him. But now that Odell will presumably, hopefully, be fully healthy by the time the 2023 season starts, Odell is somebody who what he can give you when he's fully healthy. I know there's a lot of talk about, oh, he's just a distraction. He's a diva, an off-field problem. We heard the same stuff about Steve Smith, and Steve Smith worked out great in Baltimore. I'm not trying to compare the two. I'm not trying to compare them, but I'm just saying we've heard those narratives before, and we're very familiar with narratives here covering the Ravens. But I think that Odell, there are always those places, right? There are those places where guys can, I don't want to say turn their career around, because it's not like Odell is, on the outs right now. I think a team will give him a chance. But with Todd Monken saying those things, I mean, we have to see if Odell feels the same way, right? Maybe his Cleveland tenure didn't go well, and Odell doesn't feel the same way about Todd Monken. But we've talked about it, how Monken, I think, will want to bring in some of his own guys, make some changes to the coaching staff. We'll definitely talk about those changes in a few minutes here in the second segment. But with Mike McDonald, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Ryan Osborne came in from Michigan. It was one of the assistants on Michigan staff, comes in and was the defensive line, worked with the defensive line in Baltimore. He's not a defensive coordinator over at Charlotte with the 49ers at the college level. Also the David Ojabo pick, both guys who are familiar with Mike Macdonald. I'm sure Todd Monken will want to bring in some guys who are familiar with him. And Odell, we're talking about the wide receiver position and just like who's going to stay, who's going to go. As I talked about on yesterday's show, and I highly recommend that, but Rashad Bateman and Devin Duvernay are the only two safe guys on the roster right now at that position, in my opinion. I don't think Sammy Watkins is coming back. You can make a case for DeMarcus Robinson, but let's just say it's Bateman and Duvernay, and you're building the rest out, and let's say the number is 6. I always go with 6 wide receivers. I say you get 2 veterans and you get 2 young guys. So if the Ravens decide to bring back DeMarcus Robinson, that's 1 veteran. Let's say they decide to keep a James Prochet or a Tylan Wallace on the roster, that's 1 young guy. You can bring in Odell Beckham and draft Jordan Addison or Jackson Smith and Jigba or a Zay Flowers or Quentin Johnson or something like that. And I think that gives you a pretty formidable, and you're betting a little bit. You're betting that Odell is still Odell. And he doesn't even have to be prime Giants Odell. He can be 70% of that and still give you really good production next to Rashad Bateman because he is that good. He was good for the Rams before he got injured. He helped them win playoff games. He scored a touchdown in the Super Bowl. So I think for what the Ravens have right now, you need veterans and you need young guys. I think Odell can come in, and if Todd Monken likes Odell and Odell feels like there's an opportunity in Baltimore, if Lamar comes back and he wants to play with Lamar, Odell's not going to cost you $80 million over 5 years. Odell's not going to cost you $50 million over 4 years. He will be, maybe it's a 1-year prove-it deal, a 2-year deal, it's team-friendly, where he can say, I want to rebuild my value for a little bit and then get one more big contract, or maybe he just likes it enough where he stays. I don't know, but I do think that there is a possibility that Odell comes to Baltimore this offseason. I'm not saying it's 100% certain, but I think the comments from Todd Monken were certainly telling. I'm sure Odell will catch wind of them one way or the other. And with reported interest, it seemed like there was some interest between the Ravens and Odell last offseason and during the season. Maybe it happens. And honestly, I would not be opposed to it happening here. But we will see what happens. Again, a lot of exciting things happening this offseason for the Ravens and a lot of shakeups. And we'll talk about the coaching shakeup that happened for the Ravens on Wednesday, talking about the quarterbacks coach, the wide receivers coach, strength and conditioning, and so much more coming up next here on Locked On Ravens. But first, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And the midway point of the NBA season is here. And now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back. If your first bet doesn't win, just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drains. And the Denver Nuggets, they are back in action tonight. I'm excited. I'm a Denver Nuggets guy for those who do not know. And if you do know, I've talked about it a ton. And for the Nuggets, they're playing Cleveland, the Cavaliers, and Cleveland's actually favored in this one. Denver goes on the road for this one. So we'll see what happens. I'm excited about that game, but FanDuel also has so many more exclusive bets like the 2x3, which is 2 3-pointers scored in the first 3 minutes. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. We return here. It's our second segment of Locked On Ravens here on Thursday. Kevin Oestreicher still hanging out, talking with you here. Ravens football, of course, and we had plenty of news. We had plenty of news of the Ravens on Wednesday after the Ravens introduced Todd Monken, and Monken said, hey, the offensive staff, it is still a work in progress. We saw some of that progress be made as the Ravens had a shakeup on their offensive coaching staff, and the news kind of leaked throughout the course of the day. The Ravens made an official announcement as well, so it's set in stone now for most guys. We still have a couple of uncertainties with a couple of players in terms of what their next roles will be. But long story short, and we'll get into this first, Willie Taggart, former Florida State head coach, FAU head coach. He's had a lot of head coaching stints in college football. He is now the Ravens running back coach. This is his first NFL job. He was the head coach at Oregon and South Florida, Western Kentucky. And he actually was an assistant on the Stanford team from 2007 to 2009. He was the running backs coach under Jim Harbaugh. So Harbaugh to Harbaugh connection. We know that, the Ravens are a connection-based team where, a lot of connections from a lot of guys coming in. And this is another one where Willie Taggart comes in now. He will be the new running backs coach. Now, Craig Versteeg is the guy who looks to be on the outside looking in right now. Maybe he's reassigned. That could definitely happen. He's been with the organization for a long time and has worked in a ton of different roles. So I think they could reassign him to a different role right now. But with Taggart coming in, is the running backs coach. Craig Versteeg is the guy right now who we'll wait to see what happens there. Then the Ravens announced a move for T. Martin, going from wide receiver coach to quarterback coach. Now, I know that, some people view this as a lateral move. Me personally, I view it as a promotion. I think that, one, this gives T. Martin a better shot at landing an offensive coordinator position, assuming, he has good results next year. He was already interviewed, or he was requested to interview for the Indianapolis job before he was given to somebody else. But Martin is somebody who has done good work. I know there's a lot of conversation about it. The wide receivers don't do anything. They haven't done anything with the Ravens. I think T. Martin and obviously Keith Williams, want to give Keith Williams some credit too. Those guys have been big in the developments of guys like Devin Duvernay, who we saw have a huge leap. We were seeing some Rashad Bateman development as well. Those two guys, T. Martin and Keith Williams, have been key in that. So Martin moves over to the quarterback coach, and obviously Martin was a quarterback himself. He was in the 2000 draft. He was a 5th round pick, and he was one of, the 6th? I think it's the 6th, before Tom Brady was picked out of Michigan in that 2000 draft. Went to Tennessee, obviously, went back to Tennessee, did a little coaching there, and also was at USC, the offensive coordinator. So he does have play calling experience. He's worked with, mostly he's been a wide receivers guy. The last quarterback coach title he had was with New Mexico back in 2009. Then it's been a lot of wide receiver coaches and pass game coordinators, etc. But Martin is a very smart guy. Yeah, I think he knows the ins and outs of football a lot. I think this is a good move for the Ravens. Now, another guy who's on the outside looking in is James Urban. There's been a lot of conversation over the last few days about what James Urban's future could be with the Ravens. I know he's been linked to Cleveland because Kevin Stefanski and James Urban are apparently very good friends. So maybe this is the end of the road for James Urban. Maybe he can stay on the staff. I would, if I'm predicting, I would probably say James Urban goes to Cleveland or goes somewhere else. I think this is probably it for James Urban. Urban's been there for a while, came over from the Cincinnati Bengals. He was the wide receivers guy over there, I believe, and worked with Lamar Jackson for these past years and getting Lamar Jackson and molding him into kind of the guy that he is. James Urban was a very big part in that. So I think Urban's a good coach, but I think for the Ravens, this was a move they felt like they needed to make. And who's the next guy for wide receiver coach? My first thought was Keith Williams. I think that would be a role that he could easily transition into. Maybe Todd Monken wants to bring over somebody, just like we talked about in the first segment, though. Maybe he has an outside coach in mind. Maybe he brings someone from Georgia or someone from his Cleveland days or his Tampa days that can plug in there and be the wide receivers coach for them. So we'll see how that works out. Also, though, strength and conditioning, we have a change there as the Ravens and Steve Saunders have parted ways, and they actually already tabbed their replacement. Scott Elliott is now the team's new strength and conditioning coordinator. Now, this was a move that probably should have happened a couple years ago. Saunders is probably most known for coming into the facility with COVID symptoms and pretty much giving the team COVID, allegedly, reportedly. That's what happened. And, went in for a workout, had been displaying COVID symptoms, and that's obviously when the Ravens breakout happened. So, you put 2 and 2 together, and that's what it is. But Saunders got a lot of backlash for that. A lot of people thought that he should have been fired for that incident, myself included. But the Ravens end up keeping him on the staff. The Ravens had a historic number of injuries in 2021, prompting Baltimore to make plenty of changes to their, regimen, to their schedule. Obviously, training camp, they moved from the afternoon to the morning, from the morning to the afternoon, excuse me. And it felt like the move should have happened a couple years ago. So I think this is a positive for the Ravens. And Saunders was with the team for a while, for 7 years. And now for Scott Elliott, he has been with the team for 4 years. It was his second as an assistant strength and conditioning coach. And now he will oversee the strength and conditioning program. And, that's obviously helping the players prepare for the season. So I think, again, a good move for the Ravens, moving on from Saunders, bringing in a guy who's, again, familiar with the organization. It's another internal promotion here. But I think that it's almost addition by subtraction with the Saunders move. And then we had final news coming out kind of later in the night about a coach that is leaving the Ravens. In a report from Matt Zenitz that UCLA is expected to hire Ravens safeties coach Danton Lynn as their defensive coordinator. He's the son of ex-Los Angeles Charger head coach Anthony Lynn, and Danton Lynn is regarded, I think, as a very young up-and-coming coach. UCLA nabs him reportedly for their defensive coordinator position. So this is actually the second Ravens coach who will be leaving for the defensive coordinator position for a college team, as I talked about Ryan Osborne in the first segment. So tons of changes here, and every team goes through something like this every season. Now for Baltimore, they've been a coaching factory for years. Head coaches, offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators, guys going from college to the Ravens and the Ravens to college. It's a cycle every single season. But I give these moves a net positive for Baltimore. We will still figure out, and John Harbaugh releasing obviously a couple of statements about both T. Martin and the Willie Taggart hire, which I think both are solid moves. I mean, John Harbaugh about T. Martin, he said, quote, "I'm excited for T to take on the responsibility of being our quarterback's coach. T has coached every aspect of the passing game and has played and coached the quarterback position at the highest levels. A dynamic and dedicated coach. He is a high character individual who is uniquely qualified to build upon the foundation and success of our quarterbacks." And then about Willie Taggart, John Harbaugh says, "We are excited to welcome Willie to the Ravens as our running back coach. Willie has been a highly successful and respected college assistant and head coach. He has a proven track record for developing players as a position coach, as an offensive coordinator, and as a head coach, a leader and a highly effective motivator. Willie's reputation for building strong relationships with his players and fellow coaches will serve our offense well moving forward." So the Ravens are excited about these hires. I'm excited about them too. I'm excited to see what they can do. But again, we will see how the rest of the staff falls into place here with, I'm sure, a couple of other moves coming over the course of the next couple of days, couple of weeks here as we mosey on into free agency. And coming up, we will be talking about free agency a little bit, some trades, wide receivers, and more wide receiver talk here. Also diving into some more mock drafts, analyzing some mock drafts for the Ravens and their 2023 prospects. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a ton to dive into on Locked On Ravens. And we return here. It's our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher here with you. Still on Thursday. Thank you again for tuning in with us, making us your first listen each and every day. We again are free and available on all podcasting platforms, including over on YouTube and video form. So be sure to like and subscribe here on YouTube. Follow along anywhere you get your podcasts. It's again the same show, both audio and video. So if one day you want to watch on YouTube, another day you want to listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, completely, you can do that 100%. We are here 5 days per week with Ravens news, analysis, updates, and so much more. But let's now dive into a question we got here from Aaron about the wide receiver position. And Aaron asks, with the new offensive coordinator in place, do you believe top-tier wide receivers would be willing to come to Baltimore? I think it's a good question, and I think it's one where the answer is yeah. I think that now with a new offense in place, players pay attention to that stuff, especially players who are looking for changes of scenery, whether it be through a trade or through free agency, or even just in the draft. You know, guys want to go somewhere. They don't want to go somewhere based off of meetings, based off what they've heard or whatnot. For the Ravens under Greg Roman, I mean, the secret was out about wide receivers there. It took a very specific type of wide receiver to want to come and play for the Ravens. John Harbaugh was asked about, you know, not just wide receiver, but about, you know, just the philosophy for Baltimore during free agency, and mostly about the wide receiver position, where he goes, look, if you want to come and play for us, you know, we'll be happy to have you. But if not, we'll look forward to playing you on Sundays. And the example I go to is always the Juju Smith-Schuster appearance. And I'm not certain. I still think it's the Michael Irvin podcast. I'm pretty sure it was. But Juju talked about, this was back when he went back to the Steelers on a one-year deal. And I think it was the Ravens, Steelers, and Chiefs is the three teams that were the finalists for his services. And Juju talked about how, you know, it was nothing about Lamar. It was about the offense. And, you know, they run the ball a lot, and he wanted targets. And that's just what it was. The Ravens passing offense ran through the tight ends and essentially sometimes the running backs, although we didn't really see. I think we should have seen more of that, but it was essentially it was a tight end first pass offense. Wide receivers were going to have to come to Baltimore and understand that there weren't going to be a lot of targets for him because of the high volume of rushing and the targets going to Mark Andrews and the other guys in there. So Marquise Brown was an exception to this, obviously, where, you know, he had the 1,000-yard season back in 2021 with Mark Andrews, but he grew unhappy and wanted to be a part of something where he said that he wanted to be a part of something where he felt like he was actually a part of it. And I think he finished like 8th in targets in the league in 2021. So do with that what you will. But I think also this gives the Ravens an opportunity to sell to guys. Yeah, we can give you the targets you want. And I'm not saying the Ravens are going to give guys like 10 targets a game and be like, yeah, we can promise you that. I think the Ravens, there's still a big possibility they are a run first team. But the difference now is that you can bring in a guy like Todd Monken and he can get the best out of your outside wide receivers and scheme them up more, where we're not going to see Patrick Ricard in the slot on third down. That's just not what the Ravens are going to do anymore. That we heard that from Todd Monken. And I personally no shade to Patrick Ricard. I think Ricard's very good at what he does. But, you want to use him in the ways that maximize his skill set, just like every single player. And you can now sell that to a wide receiver who might be looking for a 1-year prove-it deal. Maybe they come to Baltimore because Baltimore starts to throw the ball more, especially to those outside and just wide receivers in general. So maybe an option, this wide receiver class isn't particularly strong in terms of free agents this year. So that's why I look more, if the Ravens want a pure number one, look to the trade market and potentially the cap casualty market. So, DeAndre Hopkins, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, maybe Keenan Allen. But I think the addition of Monken will make this offense more attractive for free agents, especially wide receivers to come to, because I just think the secret was out with Greg Roman and guys just didn't want to come to the Ravens, and the Ravens didn't value wide receivers enough, where those two combined just made it almost impossible to get anyone worth substance in terms of a free agent wide receiver. And there were some that worked out, pretty solidly, but there were also some that just fell flat on their faces. Like, early season Sammy Watkins for the Ravens was pretty good. End of season Sammy Watkins was a disaster. So it's those types of things. I think the Ravens can get more consistent production out of more consistent receivers. And the key to that is being able to get the receivers to Baltimore. And I think the Ravens could be able to do that for sure with Todd Monken. But let's not dive into a couple of mock drafts here. For the Ravens, again, we got these for our mock draft Sunday, over 70. I'm super excited that we got so much engagement. And again, we're going to be doing a mock draft Monday every single week and a mock draft Sunday every single week. So you can put your mock drafts below there. But let's start off with with a mock draft with trades from Eric Zickafoose Jr., who has the Ravens. We'll start off with the trade. They actually trade out of the first round completely. They trade the 22nd overall pick to the Cardinals for DeAndre Hopkins, the 34th overall pick, and the 96th overall pick. This one is interesting. I don't hate it, but I think the Ravens, they're going to want a first this year, or because they don't have a second round pick this year, so it makes it a little difficult to only be getting back one first. And I understand how good DeAndre Hopkins is. I think you could probably get DeAndre Hopkins for 2023 third and a 2024 third. I would do that deal. I don't hate this deal for DeAndre, but I think I'd try to keep the first round pick and maybe try to trade back to the second round and get a third round pick in that deal. So maybe you trade 22 for 29, 53 and 101 or something. Maybe that works. Maybe it doesn't. And then you trade 2/3 for DeAndre. Regardless, that was the deal. 22 for DeAndre at 34 and 96. And trading 34 for 50, 82, and 154. So the first pick for Baltimore is a 50. Keeler Ringo, the Georgia corner, is the pick there. That's a good pick. Rashee Rice, the SMU wide receiver, is the pick at 82. Keandre Coburn, the Texas defensive lineman, is at 86. Byron Young, Tennessee edge at 96. Jacorian Bennett, the Maryland corner, at 125. Rakeem Jarrett, wide receiver from Maryland, at 154. Connor Galvin, the Baylor tackle, at 158. And Luke Schoonmaker, the Michigan tight end, at 198. Well, trades aside, I think that I like Ringo a lot. I think he will probably end up being a late first, early second rounder. This is a very strong corner class. Like there are a lot of guys who are going to go in they're the early guys, obviously, but then the late to mid second round, there are going to be a lot of guys who go there. And I think they're all potential first round prospects. So I like that. You have Rice and Jarrett is the two wide receivers here. That's solid. I think that's solid. You're, again, addressing corner and wide out before the fourth round. I like that. You got a defensive lineman, a very good one, and Keandre Coburn, who I think could be a replacement. Obviously, you have Justin Madubuike and Broderick Washington going up against contract years here. You get offensive line depth, edge depth, another tight end, depending on what happens with Josh Oliver. I'd say a solid haul. I'm still not sold on the trades, but I don't hate the trade. So I'd say this is a decently solid one here from Eric in what he was able to do for the Ravens. Next, we have one from Gabe Iacovone. I hope I said that right, but he says this is a long shot, but if Lamar gets traded, this is a big haul in the first round. So Lamar here gets traded to the Titans for Malik Willis, the 11th overall pick, the 41st overall pick, a first-round pick in 2024, a fourth-round pick in 2024, and a second-round pick in 2025. I'd call that a push. It depends how you feel about Malik Willis. If you think Malik Willis can be developed in the Baltimore offense and he can turn into something, I think you're probably really happy with this haul. But if you're not sold on Malik Willis, you're probably not liking this one as much. I'm in the middle on Malik Willis. I think there is a chance he turns into something really, really good, but he needs a ton of development. So I think Baltimore would essentially be punting a couple of years here as they wait for Willis to develop. I think he's super talented, don't get me wrong there. But at pick 11, Quentin Johnson, the TCU wide receiver, is the pick. 22, it is Joey Porter Jr., the Penn State corner. At 41, it's Steve Avila, the TCU guard. 86, Moro Ojomo, the Texas defensive lineman. Then at 125 in round 4, Q Blue Kelly, the Stanford corner. Then Deuce Vaughn, the Kansas State running back at 159. And Mohamed Diabite, the Utah linebacker at 200. I like Quentin Johnson a lot. And some people are very in or very out on Quentin Johnson. I'm more in than most, but I think he's going to probably go a little earlier than some people might be wanting him to go. I think a team might really fall in love with him and take him maybe even in the top 10. We saw a couple surprises there, so we'll see with that. I love Joey Porter Jr. That'd be a dream pick for me at 22. And then, yeah, you hit on wide receiver and corner with the first 2 picks. I like that mindset. You get an extra corner here. 2 corners for me is actually really good. I like that. Offensive line depth, defensive line depth, running back, linebacker. I like this one a lot, especially because you hit on the needs they need right away. You get those out of the way early, and then you're able to round out the rest of the roster here and still get a couple of picks for what the Ravens would need. And let's finally round out here with Katie Santander, who this is another Lamar one. We have Lamar going to the Atlanta Falcons here from Marcus Mariota, the 8th overall pick, the 44th overall pick, the 110th overall pick, that's a 4th rounder, then 2 firsts, one in 2024 and one in 2025, and then a 3rd rounder in 2024. So this is one where Mariota is a bridge guy. He's not your quarterback of the future here. But then you get 3 firsts, a 2nd, a 3rd, and a 4th. It's not terrible. If I'm the Falcons and if I'm the Ravens talking to the Falcons, I want Drake London in that deal. Like, I'd give up a 1st and a 3rd just to get Drake London on the board here for me, but that's just me. But let's talk about the draft here. Anthony Richardson is the pick at number 8 out of Florida, the quarterback. Zay Flowers, the pick at number 22. Emmanuel Forbes, Mississippi State corner at 44. Moro Ojomo, the Texas defensive lineman, is at 86. Cedric Tillman, wide receiver from Tennessee, is at 110. Andrew Voorhees, the guard from USC, is at 125. O'Shawn Mathis, the Nebraska edge, is at 159. And Muhammad Ibrahim, the Minnesota running back, is at pick 200. All right, yeah. Anthony Richardson, I'm in the middle on. I think, I prefer a guy like CJ Stroud or Bryce Young more than Anthony Richardson. I think Richardson's probably my 3rd, 4th guy, depending on how you feel about Will Levis, obviously, and some of those other guys in there. I love the Zay Flowers pick. Emmanuel Forbes is one of those corners I'm talking about, those late 1st, mid-2nd round prospects. 2 wide receivers here with Cedric Tillman. You also get more defensive line depth, offensive line depth, edge guy, running back. Another solid one here this time from Katie. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in today. When we get back here tomorrow, we'll be rounding out the week with more Ravens content, so be sure to stay tuned for that, and I will see you right back here tomorrow.